I'd like to welcome everybody to our Friday uh, day for our ninth International Conference on Appropriate Technology, our final day. And this is where we're starting out today with our panel on innovation for liberation in Africa that will feature myself, uh, Dr. Duran Simoni, and Professor Gada Kadota. So we are bringing a variety in terms of backgrounds and experience with regards to different geographic locations that we can address with regards to innovation for liberation in Africa and also different disciplines. So we hope this uh, event. I'd like to ask Giovanni to do two things. One, I see that Duran has joined as an attendee, so if you can advance him to a panelist. And also, if you turn over the presentation to me, I can start off our panel. Thank you, Giovanni. So I'm going to start sharing a few slides, and I'm try to keep my presentation to 10 to 12 minutes. And let me start from the very beginning here. So the topic is innovation for liberation in Africa. And I'm going to touch on actually these four areas. When we speak of liberation, liberation from what? And liberation to what? And then to look specifically at how appropriate technology linked to activism and how this will play a role in terms of the broader liberation process. So in terms of what we have to liberate from, you saw in the previous slide, I mentioned racism, colonialism, uh, imperialism. But in terms of all of this, is really the broader impact that capitalism has had over the years, from the colonial expansion that affected Africans both in Africa and created the African presence in the diaspora, uh, to the legacy of colonialism. A lot of times people want to say, well, colonialism is over, apartheid is over, but many of us, most of us that experience the legacy of this realize that it still has an impact, and this impact has created the inequalities that we have to address in all arenas. Us in INAT, we see that we have to use our concern and our skills with regards to technology in terms of addressing these inequalities. And that's a focus of this talk in particular and ICAT in general. I'd like to also emphasize the impact of the capitalism has in terms of what I consider the conquest mentality. This whole idea of colonial expansion was not just a matter of conquest in terms of conquering people that then set in motion racism, but it's also about conquest with regards to land and then the whole attitude one has toward Mother Earth that's very distinct from the attitudes that indigenous people have. So this conquest mentality has an impact in terms of how you treat Mother Earth, and it's reflected not only in terms of what we see with regards to the mineral extraction, but with regards to the overall attitude that is taken in terms of how the idea of conquest is legitimized. So this is seen in terms of how we are experiencing inappropriate technologies. And these inappropriate technologies uh, are exemplified dramatically by the amount of expenditures in terms of human resources and financial resources in terms of military technology. It's reflected in general in the military technology policy. And this is why you have, for instance, the United States having over uh, 700 bases globally, and where we see that, for instance, the the waste and the contribution to CO2 waste that's done by military vehicles and military apparatus in the United States alone is more than uh, over the 50 some odd countries that are less endowed. So you have not only the US responsible for the largest share in terms of damage to the planet, but in particular, directly the military apparatus playing a role. So this inappropriate technology has not only effect in terms of the draining of resources from what could be done, but the draining of the mental capacities in terms of how we could see achievements. Expenditures on missions such as this missions to Mars, there's a lot of discussion in terms of benefits uh, from from this whole adventures into space, but by and large, these are expenditures that do not contribute to the well-being of humankind. Offshore oil drilling is another example that we see in terms of inappropriate technologies. And I'm speaking of these in particular because this is directly related to what I talk about in terms of the conquest mentality, this idea that you can conquer Mars, this idea that you can use your military to assert control over the planet is all part of this conquest mentality, just as the damage that's done in terms of oil drilling off seas is directly aftermath of the fact that you are exercising this conquest mentality. We see this in this pipeline and the fracking that is taking place in different countries. I'm glad to see here in South Africa that they have put a hold on some of this push for fracking. So in terms of the solution, we see that we're divided here in Africa, and the unification of Africa could play a key role in terms of being able to collaborate and apply these combined resources at a higher level in terms of technical collaboration. The sharing of resources will also allow us to empower local communities. And in general, uh, this focus on independence from the colonial powers is important. Right now, we see too often this notion that you, in order to grow and expand, you need this foreign investment. And when countries are talking about this direct foreign investment, they're talking about this from the colonial powers. And we know that this type of approach to development, this type of approach to thinking that you could buy into technology development is only a matter of further exploitation, because whether you're getting this foreign investment from BMW in terms of expansion, or whether you're getting it from the IMF and the World Bank or Citibank, it comes with a price in terms of they're there to reap profits and not to directly benefit the indigenous peoples or the underdeveloped countries in the South. So this is important to understand, that the alternative to this exploitation is for us to come together and to work closer across Africa. And this is why one of the agendas of INAT has been to host our conferences in different places across Africa as an effort to bring together forces in Africa to work closer with regards to us promoting appropriate technology. So I like to think in terms of us as an appropriate technology movement. And with that, I see the importance of us having linkages with other movements. And one of those broader movements that I briefly talked about yesterday was the environmental justice movement. There's a broader movement that's emerged globally that recognizes that we're in trouble in the planet, on the planet, that we have to be very concerned with uh, what is happening in terms of the levels of pollution and what impact that this is having on the temperature of oceans and lakes. We have to be concerned with the waste, the plastic waste that's being our rivers and oceans and the damage that is causing. So all of these concerns with environmental justice have created this environmental justice movement. And I highlight this other effort in terms of divesting fossil fuels, which is an outgrowth of the environmental justice movement that is a direct action that can be engaged in. And one of the things I'm advocating that even as our appropriate technology movement, we look at this because we, as scientists and engineers, become more well aware of the inconsistencies in this constant expanding use of fossil fuels and the damage it's causing the planet. So those of us that are informed because of our technical and educational skills should be engaged in explaining the significance of the divestment in fossil fuels movement and the relationship it has with appropriate technology. Secondly, I point out that peace and justice movement and this linkage to the anti-imperialism. And this is centered a lot around what we see in terms of this expansion of global arms race, this expansion of police brutality that we experience everywhere from Ferguson, Missouri to Nigeria that we're becoming aware of, that we even have seen recently here in South Africa, that this expansion of the police mentality is very much linked to this conquest mentality and also linked to this inappropriate use and expansion and deployment of certain types of military and police-based technologies that we have to understand is a clear link to the continued motivation of imperialism. And as an anti-imperialist movement, we must embrace the justice and peace movement as part of our overall effort in terms of where we go with appropriate technology. Similarly, I mentioned Pan-Africanism as the solution and a way forward. And as part of our efforts in the appropriate technology movement, we have embraced this by engaging across Africa and even the diaspora, those that are for and embracing appropriate technology as a way of empowering people. This empowering of people is a direct assault on imperialism, and that's where we're also linking it to the broader anti-imperialist movement. So when I speak of appropriate technology and liberation, we have to think of that in terms of, first of all, empowering people. And by making them more aware because of this empowerment, and it also makes them more capable of exercising democracy so that they have really examine what's going on. If you're struggling to get clean water and struggling to have your children have a basic education, or you don't have health facilities, it becomes difficult for you to really look at take a deeper level look at how to exercise your political and economic democracy. Empowering communities become key because it's not just of individuals, it's the collective. So by empowering communities, by the different types of appropriate technologies we talked about, you're placing these key resources in the hands of the community, and you're fostering this decentralization that's so key. So we look at impacting technology policy in a number of ways in terms of this overall examination of how appropriate technology lends to liberation. These conferences themselves, talks like this, panels like this, presentations like Father Godfrey's in terms of how that really empowers communities. All of these play a role within our conference context. What we talked about in terms of how we have our appropriate technology declaration, and expanding that to a manifesto is another example. Most importantly, though, I think is our community engagement, whether it's the engagement that we're dealing with regards to expanding in communities like the Songhai Center, or whether it's a matter of engagement with the projects we've had, like our rural water project in Kenya. We want to expand this kind of approach so that more people can embrace appropriate technology, and we can play a contribution in contributing to empowerment of communities and people. At that, I want to thank you for following our slides here. And I'd like to take this opportunity to turn it over to Professor Goddard, who will be our second presenter. She is located in the Sudan and has played an ongoing role in our international network on appropriate technology and has contributed in the past to this panel and to several presentations through the course of our INATs. I would like to now turn it over to Gada. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And I'm just trying to now share my screen. Just one moment. Is it? It's coming. All right. I also started from the very first question that you raised, liberation of the mind from of what and from what. And I think, like you also, that appropriate technology is one of those liberating tools and the concepts around it, and the movement that has been happening through these conferences is indeed was a life-changing experience for me. I think my very serious attempt at using appropriate technology has been facilitated by being part of this group and the solar electrification project that is showing on the tech fair. And I want to invite people who haven't watched it. These are the kinds of things that can emerge from these conferences, that you can meet people and be able to start projects that could start very small, but then really grow and make real impact on the community. So I want to start by a quote from Rochelle Paley. She's a Liberian academic, and she's been noting this decolonize the university, these calls that has been happening from South Africa to Cairo to India, all over the colonized, the previously colonized world, and even in the North countries. And she said that the problem with this 21st century decolonial turn, that it is still largely detached from the day-to-day dilemmas of the people, and that many academics still really maintain this decolonial term by just screaming decolonize this and that, but really it doesn't reflect deeper into the teaching, and it most of the time it is superficial in terms of adding, you know, non-white authors to reading this and so forth. And like you, when you said that appropriate technology movement should link up with other struggles, like the social justice movement, she goes further that we should be going, connecting with liberation struggles, not just against inequality and racism and austerity, but patriarchy, autocracy, homophobia, xenophobia, ecological damage, militarization, impunity, corruption, land grabbing, some of which you have already mentioned. And I took her quote that systemic decolonization cannot happen in a political vacuum, separated from the African street. So I chose to start by talking about the experience of this primary school teacher, but he's one of our greatest poets that he's been dubbed as the people's poet, Mahjoub Sharif. He engaged his primary school children in extracurricular activities, whereby they walk around, they sit somewhere, they talk to passerbys, and he used the grandmother as an example of someone who retains a lot of the community knowledge to go into conversations with the children. Um, and it is also my actually experience with my own grandmother. I think I probably was exposed unconsciously to appropriate technology through looking at my grandmother problem solving all kinds of things. So I took he has a poem saying a school open onto the street, and I copied that and made it into a university open to this onto the street. And I tried to think about what would that university look like. So I see it as 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 a, as a university that is full of collaboration and partnership. Um, the, that without critical pedagogy, a university in Africa cannot dream to contribute to national development. That need to happen at epistemic levels to dismantle those structures that keep us behind and women at the back and receiving ends of injustice. So we should teach in a way that is not neutral to injustices. Another feature is this debate that we have been engaging in the African academia about relevance versus excellence. And Mamadani, for example, has and then be able to include, of course, the non-literate. And the other students who worked on the school kits, um, encouragement, training, some release time, those are the kinds of issues. And also clarifying the roles and the responsibilities of the different actors, and as well as increase the kinds of benefits that could attract different students into these extracurricular activities. I'm just one, two slides. The gender issue here is that universities that value staff who add service learning components to their course. We need that because there is a very interesting disparity here, whereby you find that there are more women faculty who are engaged. And the question here is that we need to, why when something is not valued, we see more women in it? And when it is valued, we see more men. So we need to look at that and look at the development and the professions to understand what is happening there, as well as be able to look at approaches and orient it towards the social justice lens. Another issue that perhaps is important. Hello? Yes? This endogenous versus exogenous, which was something we deliberated in the last conference. And it's very important to look at why the endogenous models are overshadowed by exogenous models in innovation discourses. And we can see the linkages to the theories about the neoliberal and the market development approaches. So when we work through the exogenous model, we will be told all the time about the technology gaps, while we really need to focus on information problems. And because that would lead us towards capabilities and human development, and what SEN, for example, the capability approach, will lead us to those windows towards liberating, empowering the people. And we will also be looking at more practice-based, community-driven approaches to innovation, whereby we can foster local development capacities, and by empowering the people and empowering the knowledge they possess into our innovation, by placing them into our single knowledge paradigm. The last thing I shared yesterday as an idea for how citizen science as a concept could be also a tool to engage the university with local knowledge, because it is using the same tools that our students are used to in terms of data, objectivity, and the research practice that we have. So we, in the Sudanese Knowledge Society, we did 2 events. One was conceptual about citizen science, and then we engaged with projects, people who wanted to work on their problem using the citizen science approach. And we had a variety of projects, some about energy, water quality, and nature diary, very different types, including sexual harassment. So this is most of actually all of the participants were people from researchers, young researchers out of the, I mean, either studying or still studying or just graduated. We also need to look at the many innovation hubs that are globally linked, like the Impact Hub and the Global Entrepreneurship. There are many small hubs that are emerging all over Africa, and people perhaps would need to look at what is their impact on the national innovation system, and what are the problems that they engage in. that they face to be able to really have an impact. Because the national innovation system is also another big concept that people are considering and thinking about and using, perhaps in some more developed countries in our part of the world, like South Africa. But what has been found that the model, that the national innovation model as it is being conceptualized in the West, does not really fit and in our context, and we need more structural and coordination, and really have a good look at the ecosystem of innovation to be able to take advantage of that. And I'm going to close by looking at the dialectics of the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis of and taking the African university. So as it is now, the thesis, the African university is in the colonial image. It promotes excellence in the way it is defined. In the West, it's about international ranking. It's a neoliberal university, and it lacks funding. That's what we have. And the antithesis of that would be a decolonized university with epistemic disobedience, with collaborative learning spaces, just like what I showed in these few examples. The university serving the underserved and trying to think about finding external funding. So if the synthesis in my mind could be service learning becomes the norm, or indigenous knowledge systems become incorporated in different fields. We could see interdisciplinary research prevalent, but we could also see the NGOization of the university. So to take those ideas forward, we need to look at the dynamics of how things are working. So I am going to end here with this slide, whereby I am looking at the decolonize the university, the calls, this decolonial term in the 21st century as a trend, as a growing trend. And there are various scenarios. We could have my desired scenario, the African university decolonized. We have increasing calls by students everywhere. Universities start declaring, having declarations of decolonization. But we could still remain in our colonial image, and we engage in North-South university collaborations, like that's the main trend now. Only 2 universities make it up to the 200, and we continue on that. Or we could be lost in the middle, yelling but not really doing, and low participation in decolonization efforts. I end here, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gada. I have to remind our panelists that this is a 1-hour panel. So, Duran, I'm afraid your time is going to be squeezed here because we have to relinquish this room at 5 to the hour for the session that's following this. So keep that in mind, and we might have to have our question and answer session pushed back to when we address things in the closing session. So, Duran, you have less than 15 minutes for your talk and any QA we want. So keep that in mind because people are going to be waiting for the next session. Thank you.
I'll go quickly, but I need to load my presentation.
Okay, please, Giovanni, please hand. Okay, you have the ball now.
Okay, all right, let me do that. Okay. Okay, greetings everyone. Can everyone see the first slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So just following up from Dr. Gada's talk, I think it was a nice segue. I'm talking about the panel's innovation and liberation, but I think that the kind of innovation that matters is endogenous innovation rather than exogenous innovation. And so endogenous innovation and liberation in the global south. And I just want to kind of focus on Africa-India cooperation, but I'm speaking of global Africa and Indian Ocean cooperation. Why? Because in the appropriate technology movement, we put people at the center of development and not states. So we know that the African continent has a large diaspora. Africans or people of African descent in the Caribbean, in the and elsewhere in the Americas, in Europe, and we think that they're still part of Africa. And likewise, there are people who originated in the Indian Ocean who are now citizens of various African countries and elsewhere. And those are people who bring with them the heritage and civilization of the Indian Ocean as well. So I'll move very quickly. So the idea of endogenous innovation, yes, it does have a reference in the classical economics literature, but there is also the concept of endogenous development that was developed by Professor Joseph Kizabo from Burkina Faso, who refers to it as a kind of historically informed development that reflects on what has happened in the past, knowledge acquired in the past, but reflects on it based on contemporary challenges. And it's essentially autonomously generated development that is nevertheless open to influences and exchanges from all around the world. So this is a kind of progressive understanding of development. I will also refer to the leading scientists in agricultural scientists in the US South, and one of the leading agricultural scientists, plant and soil scientists in the entire United States, George Washington Carver, who gave his life to help liberate African Americans in the southern United States from in the post-emancipation era. So he says the primary idea in all of my work was to help the farmer and fill the poor man's empty dinner pail. My idea is to help the man furthest down. This is why I've made every process just as simple as I could to put it within his reach. So I think this right here captures the principle of appropriate technology, which is to make technology accessible to the man, woman, and child furthest down. And the founder of the Tuskegee Institute, now Tuskegee University, the late Booker T. Washington, who hired the leading scientist, George Washington Carver, developed his whole project was how could Africans or African Americans, Africans in America, be self-sufficient even in the context of a hostile political, economic. And once we started working on those ideas in Tuskegee and in the U.S. South in particular, he tried to extend it to the rest of the African world. So he went and established an institute in Liberia, and he said to them, every time a Liberian eats a tin can of goods imported from any other country, it means poverty for Liberians. It means that Liberians are paying somebody else to manufacture the tin cans and paying the price upon the cans. And all this, of course, means money taken out of Liberia. So he was speaking against exogenous innovation and in favor of endogenous innovation. And I call this the model of industrialization. So since we're talking about industrialization, we're now in the era of the fourth industrial revolution, but it's important to reflect back on the first industrial revolution. Eric Williams, the historian from Trinidad and Tobago, wrote a book in 1944 entitled Capitalism and Slavery, suggesting that what we call modern capitalism was based on the enslavement of Africans in the Americas, the deportation from the continent. Almost 30 years later, another historian from Guyana, the late Walter Rodney, wrote a book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, maintaining the same thesis. Nearly 30 years later, Joseph Nikori, the Nigerian economic historian, wrote Africans in the Making, Africans and the Industrial Revolution in England, suggesting that even after slavery was supposedly abolished or was legally abolished, that the Industrial Revolution continued exploiting the labor and resources of Africans on the continent and those in the New World. So we understand that the first Industrial Revolution came at a huge human cost. And Eric Williams, who later became Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, said in 1969, when the first hope for mankind, that while we gain the moon, we shall not lose the world. And this is also what endogenous innovation and appropriate technology are trying to do. We don't want to pursue material gain and lose the world. So what's even worse is we know the origins of the first industrial revolution, but the second and third industrial revolutions have been accompanied by increasing global inequality. So if we follow this trend, we expect that the fourth, which yet is characterized by increasing technological and scientific complexity, but if we follow this trend, then it means it's going to further expand global inequality, well, local and global, unless we put inequality at the center of technological discourse. So Homo sapiens sapiens, it means the hominid was twice as wise as other hominids. But if we're so wise at technological development that leads to human suffering, how wise is Homo sapiens sapiens? So I'll go through this very quickly. As I suggested, the notion of endogenous innovation, it's interesting, actually comes out of the neoclassical economic paradigm. In 2018, the Nobel Prize was awarded to Paul Romer for saying that the intentional investment in innovation by local or domestic firms is the most significant determinant for long-term economic development. So nothing else from outside can help you. Ultimately, it's that internal generation. Of course, he saw it as something that was meant for profit, with a profit motive. But if we hold on to that notion, is that there's an intentional investment directed towards a certain goal or certain goals, not necessarily just profitability, then we can say, what about if we intentionally sought to innovate for liberation, cultural, psychological, to freedom from cultural asphyxiation, psychological oppression, material deprivation, unlocking of productive capabilities, collective dignity, then that same intentional effort at innovation should be able to achieve liberation. And this is actually an argument made by Kamal Bob, who is a Caribbean scholar, Caribbean American scholar from Guyana and Barbados. So the innovation in the global south, yes, is interested in catching up and building technological capabilities and so on. But the appropriate technology movement also emerged, mainly in India, has also given another spin on this idea of innovation in global south. So the appropriate technology movement, E.F. Schumacher is given credit for it, but in his book, Small is Beautiful, he gives credit to J.T. Kumarappa. The notion of grassroots innovation has also become widespread. Many Indian thinkers are at the center of it, but also African women and men. So the key issue is, how do we reconcile these two approaches, this idea of scientific and technological progress, but the idea of human progress understood as equitable development and more holistic development. So we're moving then from the growth paradigm to the endogenous paradigm, which reflects on the reciprocal valorization of knowledge systems. In the French-speaking literature, the term indigenous is a little bit frowned upon because it suggests an unchanging quality. It's stuck in the past. Whatever we did 1,000 years ago is indigenous. Whatever Africans and other people from the global south are inventing and developing in 2020 doesn't belong to them, especially not if it's contemporary science. That's no longer indigenous. Only what happened, at least 400 years ago. So there's some terminological issues there, but it's not a big deal as long as people are clear about what their goals are. But the endogenous knowledge is really an all-encompassing notion that includes scientific modernity as opposed to modern science. Scientific modernity means we all contribute to this. And it reflects the contemporary engagement with various sources of knowledge, however ancient or recent they may be. So we're moving from Homo economicus, to the notion of Ubuntu, the person who practices Ubuntu. And Southern Africans will be familiar with this concept. The Catherine Odoro refers to indigenous knowledge systems.
You have 2 minutes,
Okay.
Duran.
All right, so I'll just skip and I'll just suggest that again, endogenous innovation has a cultural and historical basis. For the Africans, it refers to the diaspora and the homeland. We think that perhaps this could apply to India too. Just for some examples, so the state leaders, Jules Nyerere and Jawaharlal Nehru, among others, who put people at the center of scientific development. So we think that when the state gets involved in endogenous innovation, that as long as they put people at the center, this is something that we would endorse. This is my last slide. This shows on the left is a nanotechnology lab developing silver nanoparticles for clean water solutions. But if they were to develop the entire solution, it would be too expensive for the rural communities that they're actually trying to help. So they had to ask the communities, what knowledge do you have? A nano water filter is essentially a ceramic water filter embedded with nanoparticles. For the women, these women potters know how to make clay pots for ornamental purposes and also for water filtration, but it doesn't kill the pathogens and the pathogenic, bacteria and so forth. So they said, but please make us these pots because we actually don't know how to make clay pots, and we will then embed these nanoparticles in the clay ceramic pots. And this actually is a solution now currently being diffused in Venda, in Hammanskraal, right here in the Hammanskraal Delta in Gauteng, and Northwest on the border. And this, we think, this kind of combination of so-called local knowledge and modern scientific knowledge, but you have Africans involved on both sides. So this is really what we think can help to make innovation more inclusive and liberate people. So we have issues, collaborations between Africa and India. We missed that yesterday, although this morning with the talk, but there are many opportunities there. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry to rush. There's so much valuable information here, but we do have the student session in this room right next. And Duran, you're facilitating a parallel paper session in room B. So you need to swiftly move from room A to room B. And I also noticed that Gabo, who is listening in, you are the facilitator for paper sessions in room C. So both of you probably need to exit quickly because I'm sure there are people in those sessions already setting up to start at 11 o'clock South African time. So I want to thank all of the participants today. What's following now in this room is going to be the special student session led by Dr. Adenuga, who is on now, so that he will be given the baton or made a panelist, Giovanni, so that he can continue to set up, because he's got less than 4 minutes to set up for his session at 11. And thank you, Duran. I see you in the paper session in room B, and Pablo in room C, because I'm sure people your tech people should have already opened those rooms and had those set up. What we'll do is, I know there'll probably be a number of questions that people may have for this session, and we'll be able to entertain those in the afternoon after our keynote speaker. We should have some time before our way forward. So thank you, everybody, and we're going to now switch over to Dr. Adenuga in a minute, and hopefully, Duran, you're able to get to room B.
Yeah, let me try to figure that out.
Okay, so you can probably have to log off of this and then go back. Okay, thank you, everybody.
basically. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Mr. Giovanni, we're supposed to commence this second student session for today, and I have not seen both of you.